Welcome to State of Africa with Mini Lita Quire. I'm sitting here with Paulo dos Santos today, where we're talking about how African is a white person in Africa. So, having been on the receiving end of racism as a black person, we are at a point whereby the dynamics have literally changed. And at the moment, us black Africans don't really see white Africans as Africans. So my first question to you would be, how African are you?
I'm as African as you are. I was born in Africa. I've never lived outside Africa. I have a European heritage from my parents, Portuguese, but I don't identify Portugal as my country at all. The people there, they know that I'm not Portuguese. No one ever says you're Portuguese. They actually say you're South African.
All right, I'm going to start with, you were born in Angola, and then why did you move from Angola to Namibia?
The independence war in Angola was very similar to that of the 70s in the Congo, where white people had to flee because they were being persecuted and killed. So 99.5% of all white people in Angola fled the country because there was no room for them in that country.
And do you think it was justified that all of a sudden you were born there, obviously you were still young at the time, and then blacks have gained independence and now you have to move because they don't see you as African, which is the main reason why you actually left?
It's a complex question, Minnie. I don't think it was the Africans who said, because Angola wasn't racist. It was colonialist, but not racist. It was more in those days, in looking back 1970, 75, there was a very rigid Cold War going on between the Soviet Union and America. And let's not go into how Angola became part of the Soviet Union, but the main instigator for that hate and for that culture was very much based in Moscow rather than in Angola. Blacks were happy to assimilate and live with whites to a certain extent. Their masters, and they were the puppets, wanted to get rid of every Portuguese because they wanted to come and take over the infrastructure. So I think that it's unfair to say that the blacks really wanted us out, because I've been to Angola many times and I've always been well received as a white man.
In Angola?
As an Angolan. And they respect the fact that I am Angolan.
So the locals really don't look at you as a white person, but as an Angolan?
Well, you know what? The only two countries that white people have been, and I'm not talking about British colonialism, I'm talking about French and Portuguese. It's not as bad. The country for me that's the worst, that's this white-black separation, is actually South Africa. Sadly, but it's true. Not without cause, because the apartheid system is a strong enough catalyst to have caused this, and it's not going to go in 1 or 2 generations. It's going to take a long time. You know, when I came here, I knew a black. My next door neighbor was black. My best friend at school was black. The South Africa that I discovered, there was a total isolation from black people. Black people sat in the back of your car and ate out of plates, you know. But so that they don't think that we are African, I think that's just been an African mentality, or the fact that Africa is not that educated compared to Europe. In Europe, you don't refer to white Europeans and black Europeans. If you take some of the British soccer stars, take Jay-Z, no one says he's a black American. He's an American. America today is trying to give this African American, but that's another total game. It's not that they're not American. They're as American as anybody else. In Europe, you don't refer to a football player being a black Portuguese football player. It's just a Portuguese.
French team.
The French team
is full of
Yes, and I'm sorry, you can't. You tell any of those black guys that they're Africans, they will tell you they're not Africans. In their mind, they're Europeans.
Yeah. Alright, but now for a white man who lives in South Africa. Okay, so from Angola you moved to Namibia.
That's right. I studied in Angola, in Namibia.
And why did you move from Namibia to South Africa?
You know, Namibia was about to become independent. It was more of a career choice. You know, I stayed in a very small town, and I wanted to expand and do more. So.
And then you moved to South Africa.
It was also a bit of racism, white on white racism. I come from a very poor family, so living in a small town was very difficult. It was difficult to get a job. I had a job. It was difficult to become anybody because everybody gave jobs to their cousins, their sons. It was a town of about 20,000 people. So Cape Town actually was a big city where I could expand. That's why I moved to Cape Town.
Okay. All right, now you are in South Africa and you've been living here for the past how many years?
In Cape Town, I've lived abroad for small amounts of time, but I've been living in Cape Town for about 25 years, 24 years.
25, okay. So you're basically South African now?
I'm a South African citizen. I have a South African passport. I'm a national. I'm not a foreigner. I live here. This is my country. Although I have a dual citizenship, that dual citizenship works that when I'm in South Africa, I have no protection from the government at all.
We're going to get to the point you're trying to make right now. Okay, so now you are here. 25 years ago, that was just before apartheid ended, or around the time that apartheid ended.
Before.
You were here just before apartheid ended.
I arrived in Cape Town in early '91.
Okay, so where did you find yourself at that time in the society?
You know what? It's very difficult to say. South Africa, we had come from a very indoctrinated background as young people. 90% of young South Africans like myself found themselves joining the South African Defence Force under whatever pretenses we were told to fight. But around that time, I was quite liberal. I joined the United Democratic Front. I'd also joined the ECC, which is End Conscription Campaign. And I was quite active in a way in fighting oppression and apartheid. 92, 93 were very interesting years. I think I became a member of the ANC in 1993, if I'm not mistaken. But it's very difficult because being a white liberal doesn't always get acknowledgement by black people. Because if you're looking at a riot, and I've experienced riots in other African countries. Nigeria, I was there during the student revolts. And you're just a white person, and when they look at you, you seem to be the enemy. Because even in countries like Ethiopia, they've never been colonialized. They seem to think that somehow the effects of colonialism are the root of all evil in Africa. I'm not saying they're not, but they're not the root of all evil.
Welcome back to State of Africa, where I'm sitting here with Paulo dos Santos. So we're just going to pick up from where we left off, where we're talking about this whole concept of the white man and how we see you guys as the enemy in whatever you do. As long as you're white, we have trust issues. Do you actually understand where that whole psychology comes from?
I do. I think that the trust issues and the problems that white people that are white Africans, or we term ourselves white Africans, have are not unfounded. Colonialism was something that really destroyed the continent. So did slavery. which are not even European aspects. Colonialism wasn't derived just from Europe. They'd been there before. But the black man grew up, firstly, not trusting the white man, because we took what belonged to them. I mean, there's stories of farms that were taken, areas that were taken. So it's not unfounded. But I think that...
Okay, do you feel like you have to fight so hard to prove your Africanness?
And you have to fight, and you never accept it. And I'll give you an example. As a white African, we have our own culture and our own traditions. Black people, Shona people, Xhosa people, your traditions as you as a white African are not, they don't even consider. They just consider what their traditions and their ways are. The only country that I know that has made certain, especially to regards to marriage, is Angola, that if you marry a white man and he's white African, they don't do the full Labola or whatever thing. They actually meet each other halfway, which is the way it's supposed to be. And in Africa, as a white man, you're always fighting to justify why you're doing things with blacks. And often people refer to me as their white friend. I'm not a white friend.
Yeah.
I'm just a friend. But it's also a social issue. And for me, the saddest and the worst problem in Africa, and we could spend hours saying why and why not, but is that when colonialism ends, the new leaders, your country is a prime example. Robert Mugabe was supposed to be the savior of Zimbabwe. He was worse for the Zimbabweans than his colonial masters were. What is Zimbabwe today? I just heard today from someone in Zimbabwe, there's not taxis on the road, there's nothing in the road because there's no fuel in the country. People are starving, and I'm not saying that maybe socially, yes, Zimbabweans expanded, but you have a population of 3 million Zimbabweans who moved to South Africa because they can't live in their country. They can't afford to live in their country. So it's not that they were worse than colonials. You know, and to quote a Congolese man one day told me, you know, Paulo, this is a mess, but it's our mess. But there is a limitations to that mess. You look at the Congo today, is the mess as bad that women arms are being cut off, okay, and breasts cut off because there's a tribal war going on in northern Congo? Does that mess justify being your own? Because ownership demands responsibility. And apart from South Africa, where democracy works, okay, there hasn't been democracy anyway. I always say Zimbabweans are learned and not educated. And this is the problem.
With you.
You might not agree, but education is not knowing things. Education is having an obligation to society. And you know what? I've mentioned before, you don't get this in Europe where we talk about black Portuguese, black British. No one says that Sterling guy that plays soccer for Liverpool, that is a black English player. They don't say that.
Did you see the whole issue about the Windrush generation, which was not given papers by the British government, and yet they came during a time when the British government needed them to fight their wars, and now generations later they don't have British citizenship.
But those things happen throughout Africa. But you know what? It hasn't changed. The problem with Africa, and this is why we're living in a global society. We're not living anymore where blacks are from Africa, Asians are from Asia, and Europeans are from Europe. We're living in a global society where air travel has made it easy that today I'm here and tomorrow I could be in Europe. So, and the biggest problem for me, and it's sad because I consider myself African, is that first of all, we are not, and I'm not the only one, white Africans aren't considered Africans.
Do you feel like the government alienates you as well as a white person? Like if
look, I don't think that they do.
White people in the government because we.
But that's normal. This is a majority thing, and there's going to be more blacks than whites. There are some whites, but you know what? I can't even fault them at that because at least the ANC government has fought and has kept white people here, and in power and with money. a little bit more than the apartheid national government ever did. Because you know what? In apartheid days, on a Saturday afternoon, you wouldn't be allowed to be sitting in this office.
Wow.
You had to be in your township. So, you know, it's founded, but I think that the biggest problem is that Africans haven't moved from their cultural habits of 200 years ago. So they're not starting to think that it's not a Xhosa thing or a Shona thing. It's actually a global thing. And whether you're white, colored, black, pink, Asian, you're born in Africa and you're African. You have the right to be African. It's not about color anymore. There will always be a majority. I also think a bit of that problem, and this is a very complex situation, stems that there were tribes, there were always tribes. The people that exploited tribalism were always the Europeans. Colonialists thrived because they were able to cause tribal wars in this union among the blacks.
All right, I'm gonna ask this. Do you feel like there is reverse racism at the moment, especially in South Africa, with this whole farm murderers going on? And most white people that own farms in South Africa are feeling very unsafe, very insecure, and they believe that black people are out to get them. And with the whole BEE situation, whereby
just to draw a line for you there, BE, and is there reverse racism?
Yeah.
Not as much as I expected it to be. I think that the amount of racism from blacks to white is not as big as from whites to black during the apartheid days. Okay? They can say what they want. The DA marched in Cape Town against Zuma must fall.
Yes.
If you were black and did that in 1992, you'd be shot on the spot.
Yes.
Ask the people at Sharpeville. They would shoot you on the spot. So is it really reverse racism, or is it the fact that the poverty levels in South Africa are high? There are people that don't have food. And you know what, if I have 4 kids and they don't eat for a month, so it's pretty hard.
Would you kill a farmer because of that?
I might, because would a farmer not kill my white sister because he raped her and now he doesn't want to witness? He wouldn't think twice of doing that in 1975. You know, a lot of the hate against whites is really not unfounded, because apartheid was a monster. People were treated, you know, for me, there's the K word everyone hates. That's the most minor of all atrocities in apartheid. I have a black associate family that told me they came and fetched him and they said, no, we're just going to ask you 4 questions. His 4 questions was 9 years later. While I was in jail, him, his brother and his father, all in the same jail. His mother was dying of cancer and they said, can one go and the other stay behind? To say, do you know what they said? One more black dead won't make a difference, you don't go anywhere. That was the level of inhumanity in South Africa. So is it reverse apartheid? I think in certain areas, yes. But you know what, if you walk around Greenpoint, Sea Point, in Cape Town, I don't see a lot of hate resentment for white people. Resentment, yes, for what we have and you don't have.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these people have because of our ancestors.
Yes. Okay, you also fought the war. Do you feel like you're on the right or wrong side?
You know, it's a question I've never answered, but when you go to war, and I only realized why the average age of a South African combat soldier was 18. The reason that at 18 it's very, very easy to indoctrinate you, especially that you're living in a time. We didn't go to a war to protect apartheid. The word apartheid was never mentioned in the army. We went to war to fight against communism, the expansion of communism into the world.
You were told that you're fighting against communism.
When we went to townships, we didn't say you're going to townships to oppress black people. You're told you're going on an operation called ComOps, communication operation, is to guide our black brothers away from communism and bring them into the fold of federalism and imperialism because communism. So that was indoctrinate. But that, people don't realize that the South African propaganda machine was so strong. Do you know how many black people? I knew a guy who was still a very good friend of mine, and today has a big place in South African politics. But he studied in London. Do you know why he studied in London? Because his parents were part of this mechanism of the apartheid, as spies, as informers. The reason South African secret police was strong is because they specialized in converting cadres from ANC cadres to becoming part of their machine. It was, the apartheid machine is nowhere behind what the Soviet Union had with the KGB or even the Nazi Germany.
Welcome back to State of Africa, where I'm sitting here with Paulo dos Santos. So we're just talking about how African you are as a white person born in Africa.
I maintain I'm as African as anybody else that was born in Africa.
Okay, so there is this whole thing that a lot of black Africans feel like whites in Africa have no right to say that they are Africans. And this is mainly because of where we come from, and probably that also you haven't really assimilated into African culture. Like, you have still maintained your whiteness, and we are still Africans. We have rural homes, we go see our grandmothers, we have cattle, communal farms, and you are just those whites that live in cities. They have money, you inherited a lot of money, it's like your life is much better as a white person than it is for a black person.
It's a very narrow view to think like that. Like, not all Africans still live in the rural way, in the traditional way, and the differences between tribes. Let's use your Shona to the Ovambo in Namibia, or to the Herero. Or the Herero tribe is a genuine tribe, and there's some tribes there that still dress in traditional clothes, which you don't do. You dress like an European. You don't dress African at all.
I'm as African as I can be.
But you are not. Because if you want to be true to Africa, then dress in your tribes. The Arabs dress in...
But you know what?
Sorry, this way. The Arabs have never changed. The Arabs still dress today like Arabs have always dressed.
Yeah.
Africa has assimilated Europe. For whatever reason.
We were forced into it. I don't want to wear clothes. I want to wear my loincloth and my beads here. And for you to be civilized,
but
you had
that's
to.
That's also besides the point. The point is that within Africa there's different tribes. Okay, there's a very good book was written around about 1984 by some Dutch author. I won't say his name because I'm not sure of his surname, but it was called The White Tribe of Africa. And he actually extends to say that the Afrikaner people, the Afrikaner nation, is the true white tribe of Africa. Because no matter what Afrikaners did to the black people are no less than what Shaka Zulu did to his people. It's no less than what the Mau tribes of Kenya, which were man-eating tribes, did to the people that then ran away, or what the Romans did to the rest of the world. But the Afrikaners have actually loved the land, and they're a bit like black people. They have their little farm that they go to. Okay, not all of them are rich. Okay, they come. To think that all whites are poor, are rich, that's not true. I was never rich. I came to Namibia, and I remember playing football with shoes that were tied up with string.
Can you eat pap with your hands?
I can eat pap with my hands. You know what? I can make pap. Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
And if I think of Africa and the people that I know, African people, okay, I'll challenge them to any day. There are very few people that, one, know the continent as well as I do. There are only 7 countries I've never visited. So my knowledge of Africa, African culture, and politics around Africa is far stronger than most so-called Africans.
Now that you're talking about your exposure to Africa, I just want to bring this question of white privilege. And you are...
I don't really understand.
Okay. So you are from... Your ancestors are from Portugal.
Yes.
And you were born here.
I'm a 5th generation African.
But you are still a Portuguese citizen.
Yeah,
you can go and live in Holland, you can go and live in Sweden, you can be in Switzerland tomorrow. And yet, I as an African, real African if I may say, I am Zimbabwean and I don't have any claim to any other country. Do you think that's also...
No, because it reverses the other way. You get many people that are European, okay, French, and they're also Congolese. They have both, and they're black. So they have both sides. They're Africans. I have a few friends like that from the Congo. They're Africans, they're Congolese by birth, but they also have a Portuguese or a nationality elsewhere. The nationality doesn't derive where you're from. Nationality is just, something you have. I have no claim in Portugal. I have no land in Portugal. I have no assets in Portugal. For me, having a Portuguese passport is more convenience for traveling than for anything else.
For you, of which as
But you know what?
As a Zimbabwean, it's hard for me to even get a visa to travel.
You know what? If you traveled in Africa in the 90s, the first time I was ever arrested in my life was in Zimbabwe in 1991.
Why were you arrested there? What did you do to Uncle Bob?
Nothing. They decided that the visa that I got from the embassy, the Zimbabwean embassy in Nigeria, was forged. So after I paid them $100 in those days,
they arrested a white man
because they wanted money. The biggest problem was Africa is the paternity concept of Africa. When they look at the white man, they think, "There's my salvation. There's the man," and it works with women and men. When you have a woman of color as your girlfriend, a family and a friend think that suddenly they're all entitled to have a lot of money because your husband is white.
Upgraded our clan.
But you haven't upgraded, because sometimes, if I look at the friends I had in the Congo, black friends, they have more money lying around in their house than I have in all my bank accounts. Okay? So I think that the biggest problem in Africa is that they've never educated the people to think, and they've never wanted to integrate white people as Africans.
But don't you blame that on colonial education? Because if I look at myself, I did the whole British curricula when I was at school. So in my head, white people are better than black people because I know I have to learn their language, I have to dress like them, I have to learn to eat like them for me to be accepted in this modern society.
But so is the rest of the world.
And white people didn't have to learn our African languages. How many African languages do you speak?
No.
Exactly, you see? And yet we have to be speaking your language. So there's that God concept, which is...
It's a concept that you created. It's just the way the world developed. It's like the big power centers before, industrial power centers, was Europe. Today the big power centers in the world are in Asia. It could be that in 1,000 years' time, the continent that rules the world is Africa. They have the resources, you don't know. It's just the way the evolution moves. 25 years ago, China was nothing.
Yeah.
Today, China is a powerhouse. 25 years ago, Japan was the second biggest economy in the world. Today, it's nowhere there. So going back to that, the world has developed into this sort of backyard where I don't think there's any place in the world anymore for having whites, blacks, Asian, coloreds. It's just, we've gone past that, yeah. 200 years ago, it was easy to, if I didn't like you, I could kill you. It doesn't happen anymore. Civilization, and that we need to have in Africa.
I'm just going to ask you just one, or rather to say something about the situation, because right now it's like there's an unspoken tension in South Africa at the moment, whereby there's so much hate brewing within black people against white people, and white people that are feeling insecure, and they are very suspicious of black people at the moment. As an white African, how would you dissolve that situation?
I think that the biggest tension is generated is because of financial stability. White people in general, I'm not saying everybody, and sorry to say this, for me Cape Town is an island. We have this beautiful area here, but what's around us? The Guguletos, the Yangas, the Rangas. Like you heard today, it's unheard of. In Europe, if you went to live in a shack, your prime minister will be fired.
Yeah. All right, so
that tension is derived from money. It's derived from the financial gain, you know. There's also a lot of political play, land repatriation, but it's the way it is, and you know, personally I agree that some land must be given back to the black people. The problem in Africa ever is that when we give land back, it's not going to go to one person. It's not going to go to the people. Okay, the money that was left for the ANC in Kotu, billions, disappeared into 3 people's pockets, and the soldiers still have no food.
Unfortunately, this is all the time we have to.
Thank you, Minnie, for having invited me, and I'm still an African.
All right, thank you so much, Paulo, for coming to join us here and explain your whiteness to us Africans. Thank you so much for watching. This is Minnie Lee on State of Africa.